Good morning on this Sunday, September 8th, and welcome to the Georgia Gang. Former contract compliance officer Larry Scott becomes the sixth person to plead guilty from the Kasim Reed administration. Is Governor Brian Kemp any closer to selecting someone to replace Senator Johnny Isakson? And what does the future hold for Atlanta Public School Superintendent Maria Karstafen? Will her contract be renewed? Theron, Phil, Janelle, and Alexis are all here. The debate and discussion begin right now.
From the Fox 5 studios, the Georgia Gang starts now.
Larry Scott, the former contract compliance chief, is just the latest former Atlanta City Hall official to plead guilty in the ongoing federal corruption probe. Scott was supposed to be helping women and minorities secure contracts. Instead, the feds say he was securing money for his own bank account. Larry Scott pleaded guilty this week to wire fraud and tax evasion. Federal investigators say he took in almost $250,000 over a 5-year period through a company he formed with former Mayor Kasim Reed's sister-in-law. Reed's own brother, Tracy, was listed as the registered agent for Cornerstone. Prosecutors say the company advised vendors who were looking for government work in Metro Atlanta.
Are you interested at all in the fact that the mayor's brother, the former mayor Kasim Reed's brother, Tracy Reed, is a key agent in the very same company that Larry Scott worked for?
Mr. Scott is cooperating, and we expect him to provide full cooperation and information related to all his activities. I think it also includes Cornerstone.
Scott could get up to 21 years for his crimes, but prosecutors are recommending 2 years to 31 months because he is cooperating with investigators. His sentencing is scheduled for November. Theron, I want to ask you first, of course. You have the former mayor's sister-in-law and brother operating a company with the person in charge of contract compliance for the city of Atlanta. How do you even defend this?
How does who defend it, me or the people who are being
Anybody.
implicated? Okay, so for the people that are being implicated, they're going to need to hire some lawyers probably and defend themselves. I think the thing that came out this week, Lori, which is just very disappointing, is that Larry Scott, who we talked about last week, sort of abruptly resigned from the position. Now we kind of know why. He pled guilty for basically these crimes that we just talked about. And so, look, he's pled guilty. There's no defense. I mean, he committed crimes, and he's going to go to be convicted, and hopefully he'll come out and make a decent living for himself. But as far as these implications against the sister-in-law of former Mayor Kasim Reed and the brother of former Mayor Kasim Reed, I think that it's a lot of unanswered questions, but the optics in these allegations and these implications are serious. And if they are true, it's really just unfortunate to the city council and this mayor and other people who work down there that are trying to move this government in the right direction. So we just had to wait and see.
And Phil, we want to make it clear, I mean, Tracy Reed and his wife are not charged with any crimes, but as Theron mentioned, the optics just do not look good here.
Well, as has been pointed out, Tracy Reed was a crony of this Larry Scott. They ran a company. They were the linchpin of all the contracting that went on, not just in the city of Atlanta, but elsewhere with this Cornerstone company that I think probably, had a lot of vendors. The fact that he pled guilty right after he talked to an FBI agent says a lot. I think U.S. Attorney B.J. Pack has flipped this guy. He knows a lot. It does point out to look at a bigger picture. The procurement system in the city of Atlanta is still rotten to the core, and I can fully understand why the legislature wants to seriously consider, and I hope they do, taking away control over the procurement at the airport, especially from the city of Atlanta, and give it to a state authority.
And Janelle, before I get to you, Theron, I just want to ask you, because this was another high-ranking official from the Reed administration that was still in the Bottoms administration. You know, does this paint a tough picture for the folks who are still there from the Reed administration, who are still working for for current Mayor Bottoms? Yeah. And what advice do you give her? Because everybody seems to be getting subpoenaed these days.
Well, not everyone, but there are some folks that are definitely being investigated and subpoenaed. Listen, I think that you got to go back to day one. I think Mayor Bottoms looked at the administration which she inherited, these cabinet officials. She also called for everyone's resignation, so let's not leave that part out. Right. And I think she strategically kept certain folks on. But let's be fair, Lori. I mean, I don't think that she knowingly knew that this type of unethical behavior was going on in her administration. Had she known, she would have fired the guy. And so I think now is an opportunity for the mayor to sort of reset and to really send a strong message to her cabinet members to say, look, if you are involved in any type of unethical or illegal behavior or activity, that will not be tolerated in the Bottoms administration, and I think she has to get rid of those folks.
Janelle, Larry Scott could get up to 21 years, but he looks like he's fully cooperating if they're recommending, 2 years to 31 months. What does that tell you?
Well, I'm certainly happy that he is that he's pled guilty and did all that he was supposed to do. But I want to go back to just how the optics and all of that. We watched for the last 4 years, the nation chase down President Trump, and it was nothing. So I hate to see a mayor. So I hate to see our mayor be in the focus of all of this. I do think, and I agree with Phil. I think that I think Phil did say that. I'm not sure, but
be careful.
But I do think, but I do think that for the sake of moving forward and taking care of the issues that are really pertinent to the city of Atlanta, there should be a cleaning of the house, and just moving on. That way, Mayor Bottoms is not mixed in with former administration issues.
Alexis, this has to be hard on the Bottoms administration because this is dragging on and on.
It is, sure. It's tough. It's a big distraction from doing the governing business of today. So I hope that this will hopefully be the end of this investigation soon so that we can continue to move forward with the city.
Well, we're going to move on because we're going to move on to Hurricane Dorian that spared the Georgia coast. And this was a big test for Governor Brian Kemp, who definitely erred on the side of caution. Janelle, what do you think about his response?
Oh, I was so happy. I did. I think that having, Governor Kemp step out, and it seems like every day he's been tracking this and being completely vigilant, giving updates. I think it's awesome. So kudos to the governor.
Theron, I was surprised, he wasn't just hunkered down at GMA headquarters or inside the Capitol. We actually saw him on the coast addressing folks, right there on the coast as governor.
Yeah, and some of my sources are telling me that there were a numerous amount of calls that governors and their staff members were invited to, and this governor, Governor Kemp, was actually himself on these calls. And so, look, I think he did a really good thing with the optics also. If you look at his social media feeds, you look at how they handle I-16 and really communicating with the folks on the coast. Hey, let's sort of stagger the evacuation so we don't have this sort of picture of folks being stranded on the interstate. But I think the other thing that the governor also realizes is that that coast area is a strong part of his base. And so he needed to be there. And I love the outfit with the Georgia hat and the Georgia logo on the shirt.
Right?
Optics. I mean, his communications team definitely deserves a big amount of kudos.
But also the big winner is the people
on
the coast.
Absolutely.
We were spared devastation, the farmers, so that was the good news.
Well, I want to keep on with the governor because perhaps another surprise announcement from the Kemp administration when it comes to proposed budget cuts. The House may have ordered budget hearings this fall, but Governor Kemp is really telling his agency heads to report to him first. Phil, I want to ask you, what do you make of this?
Well, the governor has the ultimate authority when it comes to the budget and setting priorities, and as we've talked about on the show already, he is really dealing with two budgets. One, there's already money appropriated right up until January when the new General Assembly convenes, and then secondly, when that occurs, then there'll be an amended budget. He wants to have control with his department heads, and rightly so. Some departments, as we've talked about, are exempted, and especially like in the healthcare area and some others. And so there is some flexibility there. You just don't want the legislature perhaps complicating measures by calling in these department heads, and then you get crossed up. So I think the governor is right. I think the legislature has been told that basically let's step aside for a little while here.
But does that mean, Theron, we're going to be gearing up for some budget fights even among Republicans?
Yeah, I mean, I think what the governor is doing is that, listen, he's authorized his people to go out and do these cuts, but he's also telling you, hey, this is a very strong governor form of government in the state legislature, and so we also got to make sure we communicate with the state legislators. But I want to be very clear. You heard from a lot of Democrats this week that while these cuts are a part of his campaign promise, let's really make sure that he's not cutting too much when it comes to public health, public education, and public safety. We still got the Medicaid waivers out there that's still kind of in limbo. Let's see what happens with that in the next few months. But also public safety. This governor ran on cleaning up gang activities across the state, really being a pro-law enforcement at first. And then you see all the stuff that we saw with EPD. One of the first things we saw in the Sterigenics case is that EPD did not have the proper funding. So I think while the cuts are good and you want to streamline government, make sure that those three areas are protected.
All right, we're going to move on. Coming up, just when will Governor Kemp decide to make a replacement for Senator Johnny Isakson? We'll discuss coming up.
question or comment for the Georgia Gang? Email them at georgiagang@foxtv.com.
With all eyes on Dorian, Governor Brian Kemp had a busy week, but the question is, when will he announce his pick to replace Senator Johnny Isakson, who announced he is retiring at the end of the year for health reasons? Phil, you got any insight on the Republican side here?
I do. As you can imagine, I was calling a lot of Republicans, and I didn't call the governor, but he is in control of this process. There's no question, and we're talking about who he will appoint to replace Senator Johnny Isakson after December 31st of this year. I think there's two issues to be looking at when the governor is making an appointment, and that is you want to have somebody that's going to be ready to go, and we talked a little bit about this, with money and with electability. I think we all agree on that, and that's what both parties are looking for in a candidate for especially the U.S. Senate. And so I think what's going to happen is there's going to be extreme vetting going on, and I think there's a great stable of Republican candidates that could step in. We talked a little bit. I don't know if it does any good to speculate right now. We threw some names out last week, and the media is doing that. But you've got to have a U.S. Senate candidate that can immediately get on the November 2020 ballot and hopefully have no runoff, because the appointee then has to serve out the rest of Senator Isakson's 2 years term. And then he'll be on the ballot for Brian Kemp. Or she. That's right, or she. It will be on the ballot for Brian Kemp in 2022. So there's got to be two issues there that the Republicans will look at.
Janelle, before I get to the Democrats, I want to ask you, I've been hearing a lot.
about Republicans too.
Okay, well, wait, just wait. I'm getting to Janelle. I keep hearing the name Congressman Doug Collins. Do you think it's a smart move to go with an insider, or I also hear Kelly Loeffler? Or do you think it would be a good pick to go with a complete political outsider and maybe a business person?
So, you know what? I think the best decision is to interview all of them, to not narrow it down to one particular person or type of person, but to interview a wide range of individuals, and then based on the interviews and the vetting process, to determine what works for the state and in that position. So I think you should interview a multiple of people.
Theron, what advice do you have for Governor Kemp as a Democrat?
I asked the same question I asked last week. Why, and I got a lot of responses from some African American Republicans, and believe it or not, there are a few of them out there in Georgia that call me and thank me for that, sort of saying, hey, let's make sure that white women and that African American, Asian, or Hispanic candidates are in this process. And so I think that the governor's office basically had to look at this thing in its whole totality, and meaning that whoever he picks, he or she, has got to be able to go on and run alongside David Perdue. And so I think that also, let's not forget, former Governor Sonny Perdue appointed Brian Kemp to be Secretary of State. And so I think we would be remiss to not think that the Perdues don't have a lot of influence. But I think the one thing about this governor is I think he's going to put electability and loyalty first. And I think that it's a mistake for a lot of people to try to think what he may or may not do. But I really hope that he actually consider qualified minority candidates who align themselves with the Republican Party in this process. And I think more white women should be mentioned not only on this show, but also in the press.
I also think that someone has not mentioned Nathan Deal, the former governor. He could do it in a cakewalk, I think. But he probably is done with politics at this point in his career.
You never know.
You never know, but I think he would be a good, strong candidate for the GOP.
Point. How quickly do you think a Democrat has to jump in here and start raising money, Alexis?
Like yesterday. But I don't know if any amount of money is going to make a difference because of the situation with the demographics and the turnout. But I also think that I'd love to see Doug Collins be the pick, because I'd love to get him out of the House.
Well, that's why a lot of us want to keep him in the House.
I know. But
I do think money is going to pour in next year for both parties. I think this is going to be a nationally watched election with 2 U.S. Senate seats on the ballot.
So let's talk about the other race, against David Perdue and the Democrats that are gearing up. This week, Teresa Tomlinson got a big endorsement, former Ambassador Andrew Young. Theron, does this make a difference? I mean, I always say I don't know. I mean, you can kind of weigh endorsements, but I think with Andy Young, it really does make a difference in the Democratic Party.
Absolutely. I mean, Ambassador Young is revered not only in Georgia, not only in the United States of America, but around the world. To pick up an endorsement this early, right around the Labor Day sort of holiday, was really big for Teresa Tomlinson's campaign. I think Andy Young will help her with a lot of the core Democratic votes, not just in Atlanta, around the state, but also let's see what his wife, Carolyn Young, who Alexis and I know, is very instrumental in not directing his politics, but she's the ear that I really think helps him sort of really decide on what he wants to do in these races. And so, big win for the Tomlinson campaign. If Andy Young is out there stomping for her in a lot of these areas, that'll be good. But I do think that they had to roll him out a little faster than usual because she definitely needs to make sure she has that credibility with the African American community.
And to get some momentum too. And she also got the endorsement of Hank Aaron.
Yeah.
Right
Well, they're having a lot of trouble
Andrew
raising
Young.
money, and this is a very weak Democrat field. I mean, when Stacey Abrams left, she was the big star there. That would have been a very competitive race, obviously. And then issues count. That's nice that Ambassador Young did an endorsement. But basically, when you've got Teresa Tomlinson, for example, supporting the new Green Deal that costs trillions and is a command and control socialist type program, I don't think a lot of Democrats like that.
All right. I'm getting the wrap, and I've got a couple more issues, but I'm getting the wrap. So coming up, Atlanta City School Superintendent Maria Karstarfin is waiting to see if her contract will be renewed again. We'll discuss coming up.
Join the discussion on the Georgia Gang Facebook page and watch past episodes on the Georgia Gang YouTube channel.
She's been head of Atlanta City Schools since 2014. Her contract is up in less than a year. Will the school board renew Maria Karstarfin's contract? Theron, my question to you, should they?
That's left up to the board. I think that they're looking long and hard at a woman who's come in and has definitely done some good for the Atlanta public school system, but she did not do all this good by herself. She did it because she had support of the board. She had two chairs that she's, maybe 2 or 3 chairs, but I definitely know 2, that sort of allow her to go out here in a very public way and taunt some of the sort of change that she's done. I'm hearing, Lori, that the board, let's not forget, she only received 6 votes last time, so that was 3 people who voted against her. So she went into this renewed contract with a third of the board not wanting her to be the leader. And so I think what's going to really have to come out is that all this sort of public display, this sort of campaign that she's put out in many publications around Atlanta, is it too much? And I think that at the end of the day, the superintendent has got to realize you have an employer and you work for a board. And so if the board is sort of not necessarily thinking that she's the right person to carry on whatever she has deemed as her legacy, then they won't select her. But I want to commend Chairman Jason Estevez, who sat there for many, many hours last week and saw people come down from the community to support the superintendent, and he basically did not interrupt folks. Everyone had a voice, and he said at the meeting, hey, we're not going to make a decision on this particular extension at this time. So now, next week, I think you'll definitely see the board come out and communicate with the public about what they've decided.
And Phil, there is a group calling on her ouster, but is it realistic to think that you can turn around a system like this in 5 years? I mean, if she wants to stay, why not let her? As Theron mentioned, she's done a lot of good.
Well,
with
I
the
agree.
help of the board.
I agree with the help of the board, and you're right. You got to keep a majority of the board, and I hope the board says yes, because she can point to graduation rates up 20%. She can point to test scores going up, college acceptances going up. I don't care what your politics are on the board. That's a pretty good record. Where she's getting some pushback, wrongly so, or from some of these union activists that hate all charter schools, and they're locked into some of the poor failing schools, which, to her credit, some of these poor failing schools have closed, and they don't like that. There's always pushback by some neighborhoods, but I think she's doing a wonderful turnaround job, and she ought to be given another chance to do it.
Alexis, what are your thoughts?
I'm thinking that I sort of agree with what they both said, except it reminds me of what Benjamin Mays said when he was president of the school board. He used to be president of Morehouse College, too. He said, if you want to know how good a school is, just try to close it. And people, push back on that. But I do think that she needs to pay attention to the charter school issue, because a lot of people don't like it. I'm not a charter school fan. However, I have seen charter schools be very effective in some cases. So it just depends on how they do it. If they convert the whole school to a charter school, I have some concerns about it, but at the same time, I think if they do a good job, it'll be all right.
All right, well, turning to an issue that we didn't get to last week, it's the redevelopment of Fort Mac. The authority approved a $17 million sale of the former Forcecom building to make way for an FDA testing lab. Tyler Perry has 330 acres for a studio complex, and he slammed the deal, calling it short-sighted. The mayor attended a meeting 2 weeks ago, and Theron, can you kind of explain where the dynamics are here?
Yeah, for our viewers, real quick. So there was, I think, some false reporting about that the mayor went to this meeting and told the board to not vote for this deal. That's just absolutely false. Number two, she did not go there and sort of advocate just for Tyler Perry, who, by the way, Lori, purchased the entire 330 acres, gifted the 145 acres, I think, or so, back to the City of Atlanta and LRA board. And basically, I think they bought it from him, but maybe gave it to him for like $30 million, and it was only supposed to be 26. And so I think what the mayor was saying is, guys, pause. Let's not rush and just not see the full comprehensive plan here, because developers alongside Tyler Perry and others have said that if they were to redevelop this remaining acreage of this land, then this sale of Easterly may prohibit the full comprehensive planning that could be in place. And so I just want to push back on this notion that the mayor went there sort of instructing people to not vote for. What she was saying was, hey, Tyler Perry and other redevelopment and companies have said this is a great piece of land which Tyler Perry owned and gifted back to the city. Let's look at this in its totality in a full comprehensive way and not be short-sighted.
Phil?
Well, I'm not unsympathetic to some of those points, and I think it was great what happened originally by Tyler Perry. However, we do know that this LRA, this redevelopment authority, is hemorrhaging money, and they had to do something. And so I think the FDA came along with this lab, which I don't see any problem with the lab, and so they jumped on the deal, and they needed the money.
Well, yeah, but I think Tyler Perry was disappointed, and perhaps the mayor too, with the redevelopment plan that was in place, that was going to be a multi-use, multi-purpose hotels, shopping, and all that would make it a much more attractive place than this. Selling the Forscom building right in the middle of it kind of squashes some of that.
Well, I think a lot of people wanted to see redevelopment for the residents there.
Absolutely, right. But when you think about economic development, there's a lot of factors that come into play. I mean, you have to look at the median income, the businesses that are willing to come, not just what we want to come and what to happen. And I think anytime a space is occupied, it leaves the pretty much leaves the opportunity for you to see growth and expansion, as well as it eliminates blight, which obviously puts us in the wrong direction. So,
well, time went fast today, because coming up we'll have winners and losers. Everyone, stay tuned.
Time now for the week's winners and losers.
Janelle Jones, we will start with you.
All right, so my winner is everyone who sent their thoughts and prayers and just condolences to the Bahamian people. The Bahamas has certainly took a hit, and just watching the videos, it's hard not to feel it and get emotional. So to everyone who's helping to rebuild people's lives, you're my winner. As far as my loser this week is the American Airlines mechanic. I'm going to hope I get his name correct. Abdul Majid Maruf Ahmad Alani, who tampered with a plane recently. So the allegation is that he tried to damage the navigation system. And shout out to the pilots who caught it as the plane was being literally taken to the runway, loaded with people. And thank God that the pilots caught that in time and there wasn't any casualties or anything like that. So shout out to the pilots. They're also my winner too, and all pilots.
All right, Theron.
My first win is going to be Georgia State. They put up a big upset victory against Tennessee. And I know Phil and I are big dog fans, but definitely this is a program that has been in existence for 10 years. Big shout out to the coach and the players for going into Tennessee and beating the Rocky Top Nation. Definitely want to give a big shout out to Governor Kemp. As we mentioned earlier, he did a great job dealing with the Hurricane Dorian preparation. I also want to make Chris Tomlinson the winner this week. He was officially named as executive director of the ATL this week, which is the new transit authority. And then lastly, again, I'm a dog fan, but I want to give a big shout out to Georgia Tech. They named their new president. Her name is, I think it's Angel Cabrera. So if I mispronounce it, I apologize, but want to welcome her to the city and hope that Georgia Tech is going to turn things around.
Good, Phil.
Well, I also echo my colleagues on Governor Kemp being a winner for his handling of the whole hurricane. And the Atlanta Braves, I have to include in that.
Great.
You know, they had all of the evacuees come in and gave them free tickets. I thought that was a nice gesture. And Lori, this is a colleague of yours from TV days. Remember consumer investigator now, Dale.
I do. He used to sit right next to me.
That's exactly right. He's got a new book that's coming out this week that you can get on Amazon. And this is pretty good. I've read some of these tips. Don't get scammed. Get smart. That's the title of his book. And there's all sorts of scams around there. Remember when you got that money from the Nigerian prince?
Yeah.
You shouldn't have done that. But anyhow.
Guess what? You would have read your agent. Yeah, no question there.
So, Dale,
We all love Trust Dale. Yes. All right. And Alexis.
Okay, I'm going to remind voters that early voting has already started for the Atlanta School Board and Fulton County Commission. There are 9 candidates in each of those races, so people need to look over that and pay attention to it and vote. But the special election is September 17th, so that's pretty soon around the corner. Also, Ralph Long Jr., Lawrence Williams, Ford Green, and Ronald Yancey are being recognized at Georgia Tech as part of the effort to desegregate the institution. Ronald Yancey was the first black to graduate in 1965.
All right, we got to wrap it there. So thank you. And thank you, everybody, for joining us. We'll see you again next week. Bye-bye.
The opinions expressed in this broadcast are those of the panelists appearing in this program.